National security has always been a high priority to protect the freedom and democracy that we treasure so much. Hi, I'm Eva Patel.
I'm Doug Allen.
And I'm Jenna Verbance, and welcome to this special edition of WGLH TV, which focuses on all the veterans who have been so important in fighting for the freedoms in our country.
In America, many people take our freedoms for granted. We forget the people who came before us, who paved the path on which we walk.
Over the past few years, the students and staff at Gahanna-Lincoln High School have made preserving and honoring our history a priority.
This all started 6 years ago when we held a senior prom for all World War II veterans who were unable to attend their prom while they were fighting in the war.
It was a truly collaborative effort. The jazz band played music for the dance, and members of the TV class and members of student council helped plan the event.
We found this story in our archives by a 2001 graduate, John Tanzer, that highlighted the evening's events.
When most people think of a high school dance, senior citizens and World War II memorabilia aren't the first two items that come to mind. But for the senior dance, A Night to Remember, that was exactly the case. The National Honor Society chapter at Gahanna-Lincoln High School recently held a dance for not only high school students, but also for senior citizens who were not able to attend their high school prom because they were fighting in World War II. Both the high school students and senior citizens were able to enjoy live 40s era music from the high school jazz band. Let's listen in. With such an outstanding program, the senior citizens were grateful for the hard work of the students. Wilbur Goldberry explains.
These kids, I call them kids, but I mean young people, are doing a magnificent job, and I think it's fantastic, especially for us older people.
General James Abraham spoke to the veterans about his experiences in World War II. He gave them insight on something that they all share, the memories of the past.
And there is no way even those who were there can ever bring back that emotion, because it can only exist under those conditions that existed at the time of the event.
Aside from these memories, the veterans and students also experienced live entertainment in the form of a 40s-era swing choir provided by students from the Eastland Career Center. As the night ended and couples headed home, most could agree that the evening was a night to remember. This has been John Tanzer reporting for WGLH TV.
A year later, the Ohio House passed Bill 77, which allowed high schools to award diplomas to World War II veterans who had not finished their schooling due to their participation in the war.
As a staff, we took the initiative that very year to hold a graduation ceremony for these veterans. The high school band played Pomp and Circumstance, and local elementary students donated gifts for these veterans.
The school also hosted a luncheon for the veterans and their families. David Spunt produced the story for the WGLH TV, and it also aired on CNN across the nation. Spunt is now a reporter for the NBC affiliate in Columbus, Georgia. Here's the story that David Spunt brought back.
Throughout their entire high school career, many students feel that 4 years is certainly a long time to wait for their high school diploma. Recently, at Gahanna-Lincoln High School, 8 World War II veterans received their diploma nearly 60 years after their original graduation. The graduation was made possible by Ohio House Bill number 77, which is now giving veterans recognition for their efforts.
Jack Edward Ware, class of 1943.
This year's graduation ceremony was just the second in a series of events when last year the National Honor Society hosted a senior prom for those veterans who could not attend their prom due to fighting in the war. News of the graduation went out early in the local community, and former Naval Buck Sergeant Boyd Wooten explains.
I never once gave it a thought. I saw an article in one of our magazines pertaining to military personnel and what was going on in Franklin County, and so I decided, why not? I said, I think I'd probably be entitled to it.
The graduation was a learning experience for students, welcoming guests from all over the country, including the high school choir, as well as local politicians. Director of Community and Pupil Services, Dale Ford, gives us insight.
I think one of the things that truly made the graduation ceremony very, very exciting was the opportunity for the graduates to have invitations to send out to friends, guests, and a number of them had family members travel great distance to come and join in the celebration.
An emotional audience listened to graduate Robert Dickendasher, who reminded everyone of all the men who fought in the war and did not return to receive their diplomas.
He stepped on a landmine. He didn't get a chance to come back for his diploma.
Something to lighten up the faces of the graduates was when local elementary students presented the veterans with handmade gifts.
We've come here today to show our appreciation to you for serving our country.
Well, it just makes you feel good. It just makes you feel good that to know that the younger folks care enough to, and the schools care enough to recognize that the missed opportunities that we have.
As the graduates left, the audience bowed their heads to the benediction sung by the high school choir. As we prepare this time of year for high school and college graduations, we can now recognize these veterans because if it wasn't for them, our nation would be a different place. Reporting for WGLH-TV, this has been David Spunt.
Most recently, the students and staff here at Gahanna were dealt a huge blow when graduate of class of 2003, Nick Mesmer, was killed in Iraq by a roadside bomb.
The students and staff knew that they had to do something, so they created To Serve and to Honor Committee. This group led an effort to support the troops in Iraq while they designed and raised funds to create the largest Veterans Memorial in the United States at any high school.
The group held a dedication ceremony in the fall of this year. Jennifer Bance has an overview and tells us about some of the effects it had on the school and the community.
Gahanna-Lincoln, like many other high schools around the community, are constantly faced with the war on terrorism. However, on May 8, 2005, Nick Mesmer, graduate of the class of 2003, was killed in Iraq. It was apparent to many members around the community and the high school that something needed to be done. Nick Mesmer was a graduate of the class of 2003. Immediately after graduation, he enrolled into the Army. He was killed on Mother's Day, May 8, 2005. Construction for the memorial began in the spring and was finished by Veterans Day the following year. The final product only took around 1 year to build. All of the planning, money raising, and hard work paid off when this memorial was finally dedicated on Veterans Day of 2006. This memorial is the biggest high school memorial in all of the United States. I interviewed Senior Kevin Guthrie about his perspective on the memorial.
Yeah, I think it's cool that all the people that put their time and effort into making the memorial, and I know it costs a lot of money to get all that set up, and the architecture class, just putting their effort from school to even build something like that is crazy. Being how I lost my brother, it helps me to know that our school and there's people out there who really care about this.
At the memorial service on Veterans Day, Rick Mesmer got the opportunity to check out the memorial and speak about his son.
That their memory and sacrifices will never fade, and for generations to come, they will be memorialized by this powerful and fitting tribute made possible by the faculty, teachers, and students of Gahanna-Lincoln. God bless our students, our military, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Many members of the community and numerous high school students gather around the memorial to listen to Mark Mangia introduce this ceremony and additional names added to the memorial.
We are gathered at the Gahanna-Lincoln High School Veterans Memorial, which was dedicated last year to preserving the memory of those who've attended our high school and lost their lives in military service to their country. It is also intended to honor all of those students who've served in uniform. This memorial serves as a reminder to all that freedom is not free and that honor and sacrifice are important virtues to be attained by all students.
Nicholas E. Mesmer, Specialist U.S. Army, War in Iraq, Class of 2003. Although the war in Iraq involves many people, it took the action of one to make an impact on not only the lives of Nick Mesmer's family, but numerous students and members of the community. This memorial will forever be a reminder to this school and the community of the ultimate sacrifice given for this country. This has been Jennifer Bance reporting for WGLH-TV.
After hearing about Gahanna and their efforts with the veterans, another group, Stories of Service, is currently working with the WGLH staff.
The group was given Gahanna-Lincoln High School's name by the History Channel staff. Stories of Service has worked with many groups around the country.
The group hopes to begin working collaboratively with high schools across the nation. The goal for Stories of Service is to help veterans, especially those from World War II, to record their stories.
It is important to record the stories so that they are not lost to history.
Many of these stories have not even told to the families of these veterans, although these stories will be sent to the National Archives for others who have access to them.
There's a myth that only famous people are part of history, but history is made each and every day by every citizen in local communities across the nation.
WGLH TV reporters have been working hard on this collaborative project. Ryan Engel shows us more.
Before winter break, 10 WGLH TV students were given the task to capture the memories of World War II veterans as part of a Stories of Service project.
Stories of Service is a nonprofit program of the Digital Clubhouse Network. And the mission of Stories of Service is to mobilize young people to capture the personal stories of men and women who have served our nation, especially those of the World War II generation whose stories are so rapidly disappearing. We lose a World War II veteran once every 90 seconds, so there's real urgency to capture these stories before they're gone. Now our students produce what we call digital story videos, which are first-person narratives of a storyteller, someone in the community, who tells a specific story about a specific memory, and then the youth producers illustrate that with photos from both personal photos and archival photos, music, sound effects, medals, maps, things of that nature.
One reporter, Justin Winslow, talked about the long process of finishing this project.
For my veteran story, I was with Kevin McMullen, and we interviewed Effie Johnson about her brother who served in Vietnam War and ended up dying over there, and he was missing for action for about 2 months. And it's a very good story. The whole process of the thing was pretty long, and it took a lot of hard work. We had to do actually 2 interviews with Effie. The first one, we asked her some questions, and she opened up to us a little bit. It was kind of tough to get her to open up, but then after that, we kind of wrote her a little script to go by so we could kind of have a general story ready, and she read the script, and we just put pictures and stuff we had to find on the internet or pictures she gave us, and put it over the interviews, and it's a long story. It's one of the longest, hardest ones we've done, but it's a lot of fun, and I look forward to the end product.
WGLH TV teacher, Mr. Gregory, talked about some goals he hoped to accomplish from this project.
Some goals that I have for this unit are, first, that the students will be able to take the technology skills that we've been working on all year in TV class, and that they're able to use these to produce a project that not only will be able to be used here on our regular TV show, which we're doing a special for that, but through the collaboration with Stories of Service, they're going to help have a film festival so that these stories will be shared with veterans and the broader Columbus community, and that more people will be aware and be able to hear about the experiences of the soldiers.
Now that the Stories of Service projects are complete, we hope you enjoy our end result. Reporting for WGLH TV, this has been Ryan Engel.
One of the newest aspects of Stories of Service is Stories of the Fallen. This gives family members a chance to tell the soldier's story.
One of our own graduates, Gus Johnson, died fighting in the Vietnam War. His sister, longtime Gahanna-Lincoln staff member Effie Johnson, tells us his story.
Kevin McMullen and Justin Winslow have the report.
Hi, my name is Effie Johnson, and my brother Gus Johnson served in the Army during the Vietnam War. He was born on July 1st, 1947 in Columbus, Ohio, and grew up in Blacklick, Ohio, where we live today. When my brother, we called him Butch, and I were children, Blacklick was a very small rural community where everyone knew each other. Our father worked at the DCSC, and my mother was a homemaker. We also owned and lived on a very small farm where we raised our own livestock and various crops to feed the family. We were a very close-knit family and spent a lot of time together. Gus was a good big brother, and I was his spoiled little sister. He took me everywhere with him, from bike riding to fishing, playing basketball with the guys, and even on a date. He always let me tag along. When he was a student at Gahanna-Lincoln High School, he played baseball and participated in track and field. Jack Schmidt, a former principal and coach, told me the story of how Butch wanted to play sports but was overweight. He told him he'd have to lose the weight, so that summer Butch went home, worked hard on the farm, and pushed himself away from Mom's home cooking, and when he returned to school in the fall, he had lost so much weight and shaped up so well that Mr. Schmidt didn't even recognize him, even asking him his name. Gus graduated in 1965 and attended Enon Bible College in Columbus, where he met the girl he proposed to and intended to marry, Sandy Beasley. He also took a course at a barber college with the intention of making money on the side to help pay for his enrollment into Central State University. When the Vietnam War started, I didn't really understand it fully enough to take it seriously. I was only 12 years old. It really hit home when Gus actually left home and went to war. He was drafted sometime in late 1966 or early 1967 and was sent to basic training in Fort Benning, Georgia soon after. We were all worried about Gus and thought about him every day, but we were also very proud of him. He was a member of A Company, 3rd Battalion, and 187th Infantry that was part of the 101st Airborne Division, which had an important role in the Vietnam War while Gus was serving. One memory I have is when he came home on leave. He was planning a surprise trip home, didn't tell anyone in the family. In the meantime, we had taken a trip to West Virginia to visit relatives, and when we came home, we were afraid that somebody was burglarizing the house because the lights and the television were on, and there was Gus sitting in the living room wondering where we all were. It was a joyous surprise, and we spent the rest of the evening into the wee hours visiting with him. That visit was shortly before he shipped out, and was the last time I remember seeing him. In September 1968, we found out that he had been killed in action in Vietnam on August 6th after being listed as missing in action for 2 months. To honor his bravery, he earned the rank of sergeant posthumously. He also received a Purple Heart and the Bronze Star for his actions on the battlefield. My family was devastated by the loss and was left with a bittersweet feeling after the war ended. We were happy the war had ended, but realized that we didn't really have anything to look forward to. By the time the Vietnam War ended, there was very little support and recognition given to the men and women who had served, and some of whom, like Gus, died for their country. I was deeply touched by the students and the staff at GLHS who created the Gahanna-Lincoln High School Veterans Memorial, honoring the fallen from the high school who had served our country. I can't describe the feelings I had when I actually stepped into the plaza of the memorial for the first time, except to say that it was positively breathtaking. I almost felt as if I were walking into a holy place. A few months later, a group of Gahanna-Lincoln students and staff members, including myself, visited Washington, D.C. I had never had the opportunity to go before. When I approached the memorial, I was completely numbed by all of the names, the men and women who had given their lives, and of the memorabilia that was left behind by others who visited the memorial wall. Somebody's father, somebody's brother, uncle, friend, or a comrade. I've always been touched when watching news or reading news coverage and seeing vets who visit the memorial because they know firsthand what it truly represents. I understand that people are fighting for our country today, and I know that there will always be sacrifices for our security and safety. For that reason, we should never forget those who die serving our country, the memories of loved and lost like Gus and thousands of others others should forever be close to our hearts.
Vietnam is a war that happened over 40 years ago, but many people still understand the impact. The War on Terror brought much of this back. Another war that occurred over 70 years ago and around the entire world was World War II. We are losing these veterans at increasing rates each day.
GLHS and Stories of Service are working hard to record these memories. In our next story, retired General James Abraham tells his story. Casey Pirano and Leanne Castile have more.
My name is James M. Abraham. I was born on November 21st, 1922 in Athens, Ohio. My parents were from Lebanon. My mom was from Beirut, and my father from a small town on the Mediterranean coast. I had a simple childhood. Back in those days, for entertainment, we had dances, ball games, radio when it worked, and movies that cost 10 cents to go to. People knew each other. We left our doors unlocked. You knew your neighbor, and no one worried about Prozac or being sued for everything. We had a different attitude back then. We walked to school. We didn't have school buses then. And even when it snowed, we went to school. We never had snow days as we have today. I played on the football team and in the school band. I was on the history scholarship team and also was an altar boy at church. I remember I was outside on the street washing our family car, and this is when I was a freshman in college. And it was announced on the radio that Pearl Harbor had been attacked. President Roosevelt was to call it a day that will live in infamy. At the time I heard the announcement, I didn't even know where Pearl Harbor was or even what it was. We were all shocked, but it didn't sink in at first, not until the president made the announcement. That's when I realized we were going to be at war. I had to finish my engineering degree in less than 3 years at Ohio University, and then I enlisted at age 21 in the Army. I started as a private and later received a field commission as second lieutenant. 40 years later, I retired as a brigadier general. I was inducted into the Army at Fort Hays in Columbus, Ohio, and was then shipped to Camp Crowder, Missouri, for my basic and advanced training. After training, I and several other soldiers boarded the USS Washington, in fact several thousand, and sailed to England, landing in Liverpool. After further training in England, we went across the English Channel and landed on Omaha Beach, France. Throughout the war, I was assigned to the 255th Intelligence Company, which was assigned to General Patton's 3rd U.S. Army. And several incidents happened that I remember that are aside from the war itself, if you will. Once we were on our way to Nancy, France. I was attached to a 6th Armored Division. We were stopped and my Jeep was on the way, on the side of the road, and had been for a few hours when General Patton came roaring behind his Jeep. He stopped by my Jeep, got out, and I jumped out and saluted. He wanted to know what was going on. Well, I said, sir, I don't really know. We've been stopped for a couple hours. If the Germans had an Air Force out, we'd probably be wiped out. And he said, well, what are you doing about it? And I said, I'm just a corporal. There's lots of generals and colonels running around, so there's not much a corporal can do. Well, that started an interesting outburst of language, and he then went on. A short time later, we started moving, and as I drove into this intersection very slowly, I saw General Patton was directing traffic. I saluted. He looked at me. His lips moved, and I think he said, "See how it's done." Then he grinned. I pointed to his helmet, which had 3 stars at the time, and then mine, which had nothing on it, and saluted and went on. And never thought anything about it again until I saw the movie Patton. At that time, realized you never know when you're going to become part of history. I was shipped home from Europe in October of 1947. I was kept over for an extra 20 months because of my engineering degree. They needed people with those skills to help in the rebuilding process. I retired in 1982 as a brigadier general with 40 years of service. I think military life is probably the best thing that ever happened to me. The military taught me self-discipline and responsibility. It made a different person out of me. I strongly feel people ought to have a couple years of military life before they go to college. They'll be much better students. I know I was. I went from a C student to an A student when I went back to school after the war. The infusion of the idea of integrity, the idea of loyalty, of patriotism of the kind of country in which we live after seeing the rest of the world and how they live, it made a completely different person out of me. I've always felt this country's given me more than I've gotten. More than I've given, rather. Even though there's a lot of strife involved in the process, I don't think I trade it for any other career. The best thing we've got to remember is whenever we're in a situation, we need to do the best we can with that situation. If you spend your time complaining, you never learn anything, you never get anything done. The idea of becoming disciplined, which then instills self-discipline, is invaluable, and you can't put a price on it. War is the most stupid thing in which mankind gets involved. The world doesn't seem to be able to live in peace, and yet the greeting, "Peace be with you," is in many languages, in many religions. In Jewish, it's shalom. In Arabic, it's salam alaikum. In Latin, it's pax domini vobiscum. No matter what language or religion, peace is many times a greeting, and yet we ignore peace for the sake of war and fighting. So when war is imposed because people want to take away your freedom, you either succumb to that and lose your freedom, or you rise in defense. We as Americans have always risen in defense of freedom and have paid a terrible price for it. But it's also something that has to be done. We have to defend our freedom, and in the process, defend our country and its ideals. And let me end by saying, God bless America.
According to Tom Brokaw, these World War veterans are the last of the greatest generation. Our next veteran, Ray Bank, was a member of the Army Air Force and spent some time as a prisoner of war. Leah Crosby and Miranda Steinhauser allow Mr. Bank to reflect his experiences.
My name is Raymond Bank, and I was born on March 15, 1924, near Kendall, Michigan. I can recall exactly when I discovered that World War II had begun. I had ridden my bike to my sister's house with my friend Podge, and we heard on the radio that the Japanese had bombed us. Many Americans and I were thinking we're the same thing. Where is Pearl Harbor? 9 months later, I volunteered for the Army Air Force at age 18. I traveled the country for here and there for training, going from Texas to Tennessee to Alabama to Florida. I graduated from advanced training in Georgia in August of 1943 and became a flight instructor in Alabama for 9 months. There I flew every day, and on weekends and holidays, an average of 100 hours of flying each month. By August of 1944, the Air Force has sent me to England to fight. One of my most memorable military experiences has happened when I was escorting bombers 60 miles southwest of Berlin, and my hydraulics, oil, and coolant lines were hit, forcing me to land in enemy territory. I set the aircraft down as best as I could, avoiding high-tension lines and stopping on a dime when the prop and scoop of my P-51 dug into the ground. When I came to after the crash, there was blood all over my Mae West from a cut on my head, but I had no time for medical attention. When my comrades flew over, I waved to them to go on without me. I had said many times that I would rather fly 1,000 missions before I would become a prisoner of war, but it was too late for that. I tried to destroy my aircraft by fire, but I didn't, in hopes that the enemy soldiers would not find me. But I was picked up by the German military and taken to the Husgau, a little jail in the town. I spent 3 months as a prisoner of war in a 6x4 cell. The room contained only a bed made of wooden planks and a single chair and a small window for light. For breakfast, we were served a slice of black bread and a cup of tea. Nothing for lunch, and for dinner we had tea and a soup. My friends and I would share parcels from the Red Cross that they sent us, which contained staples such as butter, crackers, sugar, chocolate, and cigarettes. These 3 months were a struggle for survival, and I lost 30 pounds. But I was luckier than most men who had to endure my conditions for a longer period of time, like several years. When the war ended, I was recuperating from my POW status in an interrogation camp at Camp Lucky Strike in France. There I had gone from 140 pounds to 190 pounds in just 2 weeks. The return trip from Europe was long and miserable, since we took an LST, landing ship tank across the Atlantic Ocean and faced rough weather on the long journey. When I got back to the States, I enrolled at the University of Illinois, remaining in the reserves. The Air Force recalled me to active duty in March of 1951. Then I spent time in Texas, Alabama, Mississippi until 1955. I consider one of my biggest accomplishments to be when I went from the back seat of a T-6 to the front seat of a B-47, which is a 6-engine bomber in Strategic Air Command, in which I flew for a decade in the Strategic Air Command. I eventually married and went on to raise 6 children here in Ohio. I have a total of more than 10,000 hours of flying time, and I believe that most of what I've learned in life has come from experience. I faced difficult times during World War II, but some lessons must be learned the hard way.
Bill Neville is a veteran who has worked with the new World War II classes here at the high school. He has been in a number of times to share his experiences. In fact, in the fall of this year, he was here for a special panel discussion on Veterans Day to share some of his experiences with the students. Kelly O'Donovan and Scott Eisen helped to record these on tape.
My name is Bill Neville. I was born in South Fork, Pennsylvania on May 5, 1924. I was born to parents also of Pennsylvania origin. My father worked in a local mines digging for coal and clay, while my mother stayed home to tend to home. My father served in the Army in World War I. My grandfather was in the Navy. My one brother was in the Navy, and my other brother was a Marine. I was a good athlete and spent my childhood days playing sports from football to baseball to basketball. I look back fondly on those carefree days of my youth. On December 7, 1941, one of the single greatest tragedies in American history occurred when the Japanese bombers attacked the naval base in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. I was in an ice cream shop when I first heard the news, and I really didn't know what to fear. It took me a few hours to realize the impact of what had just happened. I was just a young man of 17, but at that moment that I, alone with the rest of the nation, knew that we were at war. I tried to enlist that very night with the aid of my schoolmates, but the lines were long with other men with the same ambition that a recruiter told my friends and me to go home and finish high school before going to war. They had enough people to take care of this problem right now. I thought about it and then tried to enlist 2 days later in the Navy flight program. Due to a hearing problem, I was rejected for doing what I really wanted to do. I even reapplied the 3rd time. They told me the same thing. Finally, I signed up and was accepted into the Army on December 18, 1942. From there, I went to Camp Butner, North Carolina for basic training. It was here that I learned to become an assistant squad leader in a combat engineer unit. It was my job to fight in the infantry and to extend landing areas for our aircraft, both Navy and Air Force. The military taught me to use trucks, bulldozer, or crane, and to do my job. I was then assigned to Company C 52nd Combat Engineer Unit. We were a lucky unit because most of us came back home. The soldiers who were left behind are the real heroes. During combat, we made assaults on the Palau Islands, and then later on we made 2 assault landings on the Philippines, Leyte and Cebu. We were one of the first groups on land when we hit the beach to set up security and clear ways for the other troops. Most of the soldiers were just young men. Some of them were just 18 years old. I was too young to be scared and to know what I was truly part of. The only thing I could think about was getting out of that landing craft and onto the beach. It was hard to see, but in a way that was great because I couldn't focus on other dead bodies around me. We successfully cleared the beach, and the mission was deemed a victory by our leaders. When the war ended, I packed and boarded onto a ship and headed to Japan. I was so relieved. I was ready to go back home to my country. I was honorably discharged from the Army in January 1946. Having worn a uniform for 3 years, it took me a few days to become accustomed to and to find civilian clothing. Upon return, I married my wife Georgia, and we started a family with our son. I also went to the University of Maryland and worked in numerous businesses. Now that I am retired, my son wants me to do some writing about my experience. If I did, I would write about the impact the war had on me, teaching me that it was our obligation as citizens to defend our great nation that had given us so much. It took me a few years after serving to realize this. Despite what people say, we still live in the greatest country in the world, and we should be so thankful that we have the rights that we have. So I encourage those who are fighting for our country, and those, if it is those brave and dedicated souls that make our country safe, not only for me, but for many generations that will live here in the future. I want my granddaughter, who I love so much, to enjoy the same great freedoms that have been guaranteed to all Americans by the efforts of those who have unselfishly served this great nation.
Many of these World War II veterans were fighting for the atrocities which the Germans committed against the Jewish people. Millions of Jews died during this time at concentration camps. A survivor of one of the camps, Murray Ebner, tells us about his story. He was one of 4 people to survive from the village in which he grew up. A few years ago, he went back to Germany to show some of the places he had stayed. Lindsay Nelson and Stephanie Domofsky have his story.
Here at the Gahanna Lincoln Veterans Memorial, we remember those who have served. Murray Ebner, a resident of Columbus, is one of the few living Holocaust survivors in Ohio. In 1952, he was drafted into the American Army, where he spent 2 years fighting the Korean War. We spoke to Murray Ebner about his Holocaust survival story and his hopes for the future. Murray Ebner was born on September 20th, 1928 in Vyshnitz Nowy, Poland. By the time he was 9, the Nazis had invaded Poland and his life drastically changed.
I lived a normal life till I was about 9 years old, and after 9 years old things were changing because there was a lot of talk about war coming soon to Poland, and Germany and Poland are at odds with each other, and of course we worried because we didn't know what to expect.
Even though he was only 9 years old, Murray Ebner had dreams that foreshadowed the unfortunate outcome of his family.
I used to dream that everybody in my whole family was murdered, and I couldn't talk to anybody about it because it looked like I was very selfish, and it just didn't make sense that I have a dream like that. But unfortunately, it became true.
One of the first sanctions placed on Jewish communities was for all Jews to wear the Star of David on their arms.
They couldn't go out at night, and if you were on the street without the Star of David, they did not go and punish you, and your punishment was death.
Many people, including Ebner and his family, did not know where to turn when the Nazis took over.
Why run anyway? Because we did not know. Even so, Hitler was saying he's going to destroy or kill certain people, like the Jewish people, the Gypsies, and many other people that he didn't have favor with. So he's sort of a person with a lot of hate and discrimination in his body and mind. So we couldn't go anyplace, and we were hoping the war would be over soon.
Unfortunately for Murray Ebner, his disbelief about the war became a reality.
First of all, we didn't believe that the Germans were going to be as bad as they really were. We didn't believe it. Somebody would have come to my father and said, "Mr. Ebner, you better leave the country because they're going to kill you. The Germans will kill you." My father would have said to them, "That's impossible because I pay my taxes. I'm as good as anybody else. I work every day, and why should anybody want to kill me? I didn't do any harm to anybody else, but the Germans wanted to kill everybody."
At 13 and a half years old, Ebner's life took a turn for the worse.
One day, I happened to be walking on the street of the ghetto, just minding my own business, and several trucks loaded with people on the trucks already, and one of the trucks stopped right next to me. And they told me to get on the truck, and I was very happy to go on the truck. I thought I'm going to go to work. But this time was different. The truck is going straight to the cemetery. And I got scared to death. I was never in a cemetery in my life. And they told us to, as soon as I got up in the cemetery, everybody off the truck. And then they told us to report to go to there were several tables with one of the prisoners behind each table and mark down how old you are and what's your name. And I did. So I marked down, I told the guy that I'm 13 and a half years old. He said, I marked you down for 16. I didn't care. He saved my life. He saved my life because if I would have been 13 and a half, I wouldn't have been here today. I didn't know what to do, and I sort of cried to myself. And my first thing in my mind was, oh, my parents don't know what happened to me, and how do I go tell them where I am? I couldn't do anything. From that moment on, never seen anybody from my family again.
Ebner had several experiences within the camps that will haunt him for the rest of his life.
We were working, it was almost getting dark, and there were some soldiers passing us by, and they come out, follow them. And then one of the guys who worked next to me, he was much older than I was, decided to say something to the soldier, can I stay over here because I'm a good worker? Because he was afraid, because once they take him away, most of the time they take him away to be shot, to be killed. But this guy said, I'm a good worker, and this soldier took out his revolver and shot him just right next to me. I feel guilty for being alive.
Despite having his life ravaged by the war, Murray has managed to make a name for himself and an impact on his community.
I've done a lot for people. I do a lot of charity work, and I don't charge anybody for anything. And I mean to do things, but I guess I was left here for a purpose.
Ebner has a strong message for future generations.
I would say, do not expect anything from anybody that they owe you something. I came to this country with $3 in my pocket. I had no family. I did not know my language. And I was sort of proud because my parents raised me that nobody owes you anything. You have to go out and work and do it yourself. So if you go out and do it yourself and don't be a crybaby, and everything will be fine, and be always optimistic, always be optimistic, be honest, and don't, if you see somebody discriminate or whatever it is, do to others what you want to do to yourself. And remember, we're all God's children.
We would like to thank you again for watching this special edition of WGLH TV.
And we hope that our veterans are truly remembered.
Reporting for WGLH TV, this has been Lindsay Nelson
and Stephanie Namofsky.
World War II veterans are being lost each and every day, as it's important to record their memories. This year, Rickenbacker Air Reserve had a special show entitled Mustangs and Legends. They had the planes from World War II flying for the very last time. It also gave the public a chance to see the planes up close and personal. Ryan Engel and Andrew Edegloff had special media passes to attend the show.
Airplanes looped, swooped, and zoomed just feet above the ground at the recent air show held at Rickenbacker Airport, known as the Gathering of Mustangs and Legends.
Hard on the stick, another quarter of a roll to the right, and he sets it right back on the 500-foot reference line. Every time he gets this thing upside down for more than a few seconds, like the 4-point...
Over 100,000 people drove from far and wide to see this magic in the air, some traveling for more than 6 hours to catch the action that took place September 28th, 29th, and the 30th.
Now watch him as he skids it sideways. This is the Harrier pass. He's going to fly the fuselage right down the runway, just about 20 feet above the ground. Look at it. Lower, 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 bringing it down. There, the tail wheel's only about 3 feet off the ground. The wing is less than that. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen. Holding it right there.
But why were people so eager to come out and see this event?
We talked to one airshow enthusiast from Lancaster about why he attended.
I love aircraft, just the sight, smell, flying them, everything. The amazing thing about this is that they have about 100 P-51 Mustangs, which are just an incredible aircraft, and the heritage of this event is amazing, and it's something that Columbus really has to be proud of.
The air show itself was based on these P-51 Mustangs, which were arguably the most famous fighters of World War II. This air show might also have been the last chance for some of the World War II veterans to come out and see them in action.
Now right on the deck, 150 feet above, almost 180 miles an hour. Force and the power. One pull it back. We're inverted, wings level. 2 and 3, maintaining that perfect position. Slight adjustments to the rudder. As we complete on former loop.
The United States Air Force's 60th anniversary was also celebrated, as well as a tribute to the famous Tuskegee Airmen, many of who were in attendance at the event.
An event this large took a lot of preparation and organization, and we talked to one of the team members of the Thunderbirds.
Well, actually, this air show is pretty set up. They have everything you can think of here. All air shows vary from place to place and what kind of aircraft they have, and different events and shows. I think this one's one of the top-notch ones. Well, the two air demonstrations in the military are the Air Force Thunderbirds and the Navy Blue Angels. So basically, the Air Force, this is Air Force Reserve, I believe, here, and it's good to have us here.
As the air show winds down here at Rickenbacker, the thousands of fans that attended are leaving in awe.
Even we found a new appreciation for what the Air Force has done for our country. Reporting for WGLH-TV, this has been Andrew Igdaloff
and Ryan Engel.
A very unique program that just began here in Columbus, Ohio at the Rickenbacker Air Base is the Honor Flight Program. This program is a way for veterans, especially those from World War II, to visit Washington, D.C. to see all of the memorials, including the new World War II memorial. The flight and the hotel are all paid for by donation. These veterans have given so much of themselves. This is just a small way that we as a community and country can honor them for their sacrifice. Andrew Igdaloff takes a closer look.
5,000 World War II veterans are about to embark on a journey through Honor Flight. Honor Flight is a non-profit organization that flies these heroes for free to Washington, D.C. to visit the World War II memorial.
Okay, I'm gonna pat you down now. You're not ticklish, are you?
No.
You sure?
No.
When the plane lands, the veterans are overwhelmed with emotions as they are cheered on by a huge group of supporters.
Super. Happy thing in my life. This is the best. This is the best.
For most participants, this may be the first and only time they get to enjoy this long overdue experience.
Just had a buddy died. He wanted to come, but he couldn't. So I had to come along.
U.S. Senator Bob Dole talks about the trip as well as the memorial.
It took a long time to build this memorial, about 13 years to get it finally finished, but it was done with private funds. And these are great programs. I mean, I bet 90% of these men would not be able to come here. You know, they're in wheelchairs and they wouldn't be able to pack and stay in a motel and get out here and go back.
Bill and Bobby Richards, two local teachers at Upper Arlington Hastings Middle School, recently became involved in Honor Flight.
We went over to Dayton to the national or the state VFW convention, and while we were there we met Earl Morse, and Earl Morse is the founder of Honor Flight. We heard him speak and said, this is what we have to do. We came back, and last year we raised $4,400 for Honor Flight. This year we set a goal at the beginning of the year to raise $10,000, which is one flight. We wanted to have our 100 students raise enough money to pay for one flight of veterans to go to Washington, D.C. So that was our goal.
And when he told me we were going to raise $10,000, I said, what? However, we have done that and more with the help of a great many students doing a great many projects. Plus, because of the publicity that we got for some of those projects, we have had donations come in from the community as well. And our total as of today is
about $24,000.
The middle schoolers at Upper Arlington will be in Washington, D.C. during one of the trips and talk about their excitement.
I think it's going to be really special for everyone because we're all going to be clapping, and I think the veterans are going to start crying and become really emotional about it. And I think it's just going to be a great experience for everyone.
The Richards have just inspired us to want to help, and when we hear about all of the stories about how the veterans cry and how they're so happy to see their memorial, it just makes us want to help out even more, and I just love being a part of it.
Honor Flight is a truly remarkable program, and the work being done at Upper Arlington Hastings Middle School is vital to its success. Hopefully here at Gahanna, we too can begin efforts to fundraise for the program. Reporting for WGLH-TV, this has been Andrew Igdaloff.
Over the past 6 years, our military has been working hard to protect us against terrorist groups. Even though the war itself has divided U.S. citizens, we are unified in supporting our troops.
Our very own school board member, Jeff Carson, spent nearly a year in Iraq fighting for our country. One thing that 9/11 did accomplish was that it made us very vulnerable as a nation. Gahanna Lincoln High School and the city of Gahanna participated in a terror drill sponsored by grant money from the Homeland Security Department. Andrew Idegloff has the scoop.
In order to assure that we are prepared for anything happening in the future, Gahanna Lincoln High School took this priority one step further on September 6th. Gahanna participated in a county-wide simulated terrorist attack funded by a $60,000 grant from the Homeland Security Department. The exercise included the fake explosion of a car bomb and the explosion of a dirty bomb with radiation near the band room, where a select group of students and volunteers pretended to be injured by the explosion. When the exercise began, all the major emergency response departments raced to the school to assess the situation and help the injured. A group of evaluators were around at all times to grade the efforts of the response teams. 46 seniors were chosen to act like victims during the drill. The theater department applied makeup and fake blood to make their assigned injuries more realistic. Also, a med-flight helicopter landed on the practice football field to help take victims to the hospital. I spoke with Police Officer Blamer about his experience with the events.
The only thing they told us is what day, what time,
and where the incident was going to be. We didn't know what exactly it was going to be. We knew that there was supposed to be some car explosion, but we didn't really know anything else, what else was going to be involved in it.
He then continued on with his overall opinion of the exercise.
First, I think it was a great exercise, and two, I think it went relatively smooth for never being involved in anything like that. When you do stuff like that, you always find stuff that you never even thought about when it goes into effect or when it comes into play.
But why was the high school chosen as a site for this exercise? Principal White explains.
I'm Mark White, principal of Lincoln High School, and we recently hosted the terror drill. We were approached back in May about possibly hosting the drill, and we thought it would be a good opportunity to have first responders practice responding to Lincoln High School, not only for a possible terrorist attack, but also because if we ever had a fire, a tornado, some sort of calamity happening at the school, the responders could practice getting here, and they'd be better off if a real event occurred to help our students be safe.
Dean of Students, Mrs. Murdoch, gives her view on the drill.
Well, it's kind of mixed. It's an unfortunate display in our time that we have to do these drills, because years ago this kind of thing would never happen in schools. For us, it's really to test the county's reaction time, not ours, but it gives us a chance to practice and think through what we would do in case we ever have to. So it's really good that we have the opportunity to do this.
As we head towards Election Day, voters around America will be looking for a candidate who can balance the issue of security on the home front, as well as our obligation to progress as a nation. Reporting for WGLH-TV, this has been Andrew Igdaloff.
It is with great honor and appreciation that the WGLH-TV class work with Stories of Service to bring you this special edition. Our hope is to keep recording veteran stories so we can learn about history not just through a textbook.
It is not just generals and famous leaders that make history. It's the very people in our communities that give us the freedom to do what we want.
We want the voices of the men and women who gave up so much and fought so hard for our country to be remembered and recorded forever. As a school, we spent much time working on the Veterans Memorial, standing right in front of our school.
The students wanted a permanent reminder of the soldiers and their families' sacrifice to our country.
We hope that through this special documentary, we have brought their stories to life for you. I'm Eva Patel.
I'm Doug Allen.
And I'm Jenna Verbance, reporting for WGLH-TV.
Speech, religion, petition, press, assembly.
To publish what's relevant to me.
To believe in whatever I choose.
To join together for change.
To express myself.
To let our voices be heard.
Be active and take advantage of these freedoms.